have to start from the beginning. Sorry for that. Sorry, I'm too clumsy. All right. So take it away.
Okay. Well, I hope to be a customer and beneficiary of Libya's technology at some point in the future. My name is Teal Lido. My email address is cut off at the bottom of the screen here, but hopefully it'll be visible on the subsequent slide. But I am the founder of a company called Radvocate. My background is in law and also in online consumer businesses. I went to law school. I graduated in 2012, and I went to work at Cravath doing M&A for a few years. And then through a very tortuous career transition experience, eventually wound up as the senior manager of research and development at LegalZoom, where I basically helped our CPO to conceive of and develop and market test some of our wackier products, many of which I'm sure many of you have heard of or seen. About 6 months ago, I started Radvocate after leaving LegalZoom, and it basically sprung out of a really bad customer experience I had with an airline, and the legal process that I went through to get that resolved, which was sort of magical and surprising in all sorts of ways, and I wanted to share that with other people, and this is how I'm doing it. As I mentioned, it was about 6 months ago I launched this as an MVP. Very quickly found very strong evidence of product market fit. Since then, processed almost 200 consumer claims and have been iterating through various acquisition and fulfillment and revenue models. All right, so that's sort of the 30,000-foot background, and I'm going to dive into the problem we're solving and kind of how we do it. All right, so imagine you get screwed over by a big company. Comcast sells you a bundle at one price and they deliver at a significantly higher price. You have unlimited roaming on your AT&T wireless plan, but they charge you $200 for it anyway. And instead of fixing it, they send you to collections. You go online looking for a cheap rental car, you choose the least expensive option, and then when you get to the counter to pick up the car, it's twice as expensive because there are all these hidden fees tacked on. I know that this probably isn't hard for many of you to imagine because this happens all the time to literally every single adult in the United States, which is 200 million people. And I'm guessing that I have your Comcast, awesome.
You had me at Comcast.
I'm guessing this happens multiple times a year to a lot of people, so we can all kind of sympathize with it. So what do we do when this happens? Traditionally, there are really two options for fighting a company like Comcast, AT&T Wireless, or Thrifty. The first one is customer service. You'll call them, you'll wait on the phone for quite some time to talk to someone who's probably not capable of solving your problem, and they're not incentivized to either because they're primarily incentivized by revenue protection. It's also kind of fundamentally irrational because where else do we get into a fight with someone and then go to them to adjudicate that fight? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't lead to just outcomes. It's time-consuming, emotionally taxing, irrational, and ineffective. It's a bad option. So you get off the phone with customer service. I'm sure many of us have hung up that phone before. And what do you do next? You vent online. You go to Yelp, you go to Google Reviews, maybe you go to the Better Business Bureau, and you leave them a scathing review. But that's not a very good option either, because it doesn't actually do anything to solve your problem. And that satisfaction only lasts for a few minutes. Then you might feel a little bit dirty about leaving that review. And also, it perversely bolsters brand recognition for a lot of people, and sometimes can have weird impacts on their SEO. So you can kind of benefit the person who's messing with you. So that's not a very good option either. So traditionally, if you're a consumer and you're in a dispute with a large company, you're frustrated and you're powerless. And Radvocate is designed to give you some power in that situation. So it's an easy-to-use and free online consumer advocacy service. Our clients find our website, they drop in a little bit of information into a very structured questionnaire about their issue. It takes about 5 minutes. and then they sit back and relax, and we handle things. They get to, we file an official claim on their behalf and pursue it. They get to watch the process online through a dashboard. We send them regular email updates about the progress. We resolve most of these claims in under 60 days. And on average, we return over $1,000 in refunds and other cash compensation to the people who use our service. And to people who have battled with customer service before, trying to get just like a small charge reversed, a lot of this can seem a little bit weird and like too good to be true. So it begs the question, how does this work on the back end? Well, instead of going to the company and asking them to voluntarily solve their problem, we take advantage of third-party arbitration provisions that are built into every business's consumer contract. We take our very kind of colloquial consumer complaints and refine them down into legally cognizable claims through our questionnaire. And all those claims are linked to statutory or common law remedies, which gives all these claims a lot more force. We automatically generate all the documents we need as far as demand letters and filing forms go, which can be the bulk of the actual legal work that's required in pursuing these claims. And for very complex claims or tricky ones, kind of borderline ones, we integrate attorneys who can negotiate with the companies and actually litigate through an arbitration if necessary. So that's roughly what's happening on the back end. That's the problem, that's the value prop. But now let me tell you what I'm actually trying to do as Advocate. If you kind of peel off this top layer and that value proposition, there's something else underneath. And this is going to get just a little bit wonky, but bear with me. Traditionally, consumer service or consumer protection rules have been enforced through class actions. So antitrust, debt collection, credit reporting, electronic funds transfers, unfair and deceptive practices, all of these sorts of claims in the past have been grouped together. They're fairly small value claims, and usually the only efficient and cost-effective way to pursue them is to have a plaintiff's attorney kind of do it all at once. But in the 1990s, a lot of companies who were feeling pretty scarred by this like bet the company sized class action litigation started brainstorming ways to shut down consumer class actions. And one of the ways they came up with is this. So this is a mandatory individual arbitration clause. It shows up in every consumer services contract that you enter into. If you sign up for internet service, a wireless contract, if you take a plane, if you rent a car, if you take an Uber or a Lyft, open a bank account, open a credit card, any of these consumer services, you're agreeing to something that's substantially like this. And what it basically says is that if you have a dispute with the company that's providing the service, you agree to bring it in private arbitration and individually. And in other words, that means no courts and no class actions. And this, struck a lot of people as kind of abusive because it kind of deprives you of the only cost-effective way of vindicating a lot of statutory rights and bringing a lot of protection claims. So over a decade, a lot of states started declaring it to be unenforceable and unconscionable. Over a dozen states by the early 2000s. And then in 2011, AT&T appealed one of those state rules holding that clause to be unenforceable to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, in a decision called Concepcion, basically said it struck down all those state rules and said that those clauses were enforceable. And academia and the judiciary reacted with a little bit of alarm, because basically what was happening was you were taking away the only cost-effective way to pursue and vindicate a lot of very important rights, antitrust rights, all the things that I listed off. And I think Justice Breyer put it the best when he said the realistic alternative to a class action is not 17 million individual suits, but 0 individual suits, as only a lunatic or a fanatic sues for $30. So a lot of people predicted that basically there would be no hammer there, there was no significant liability that was preventing a lot of big corporations from engaging in a lot of bad practices, and that consumers would be losing billions of dollars in liability on the table. And those critics were right, and we know that in retrospect. So in 2015, for example, the top 4 wireless carriers have 420 million customers. And in that same year, they received 40 claims through individual arbitration. So that's fewer than 1 in 10 million cellular customers that brought a legal claim against the 4 largest carriers. And it's not because they're behaving themselves. So in that same year, the FTC received over 250,000 complaints. 10% of their entire complaint load was focused on cellular carriers. And state AGs went after them for over $200 million in fines for violating consumer protection statutes. And these are the same statutes that give rise to private rights of action. So individual consumers would also be able to go after them for that sort of money. So there are billions of dollars in liability that consumers are not getting here that they're entitled to. And that's basically what Radvocate is doing. Anyone who finds a cost-effective and efficient way of pursuing that liability through mass individual arbitration can help consumers unlock all that. And that's the purpose of Radvocate. And before I see the floor, let me just put out a pitch. I'm looking for a technical co-founder right now. So if anyone on the line or in the room knows of any good candidates who might be interested in something like this, definitely drop me a line. And that's my email address.
Cool. So how do you scale the system? I mean, internally, if you have to bring all these lawsuits, or go to small claims court, or
no. So arbitration. So
are you going through arbitration on behalf of them? Okay.
And in sort of an ironic twist, so companies basically said, we're scared of class actions. We're going to push everyone into individual arbitration. Kind of ironically, individual arbitration is a much easier interface to work with than the court system.
Sure.
So you can file a claim online in 5 minutes. Multi-jurisdictional practice is very easy. There's sort of a consistent set of rules that covers the entire nation. It's very easy to engage with in an automated way. So large portions of the fulfillment can be scaled incredibly easily. It's just software. There's certain parts that require some degree of human interaction and some skilled human interaction. But a lot of those, I think, in the future have the ability to be automated out, especially because these are very cookie-cutter claims that are coming through with the exact same kind of pattern of engagement with humans. And also, the amount is actually very manageable and very low. So you can process an enormous amount of claims with, one paralegal and one attorney sitting in the back.
And what's your strategy to bring cases in? How do you make people aware of you?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of work on acquisition testing, and right now it's a mixture of SEM and display. The revenue that's coming in from these claims, and we monetize on most of these through commission. Sometimes the companies will just pay us to resolve the claims directly because statutes entitle us to attorney's fees. But we also take commissions if we can't get attorney's fees. And in the unit economics work out such that we can, acquire through normal SEM channels or display channels, and we still have healthy margins.
Cool.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind. On your thing, your address, your email address is blocked. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure, I can just move it higher too. It's my first name, Teal, at myradvocate.com. Can you see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So it was very impressive. I really like the idea. And I'm from Europe, and in Europe, or at least in Germany, we do have some very similar company. It's called Flightride. You probably heard about that.
Yep.
Because in Europe there is this highly standardized consumer protection regulations. We have them. They basically come from the European Union. So what they say, I know the founder, and it's working quite well actually. And they say they only focus on one particular stream of customer complaints, namely Flightride. They do not do this carrier mobile stuff. They do not do all these other things that you mentioned on your webpage. Do you plan to boil it down, as you see what's going best, or you really want to state that broad?
Are really, so I don't want to get into too much detail about the acquisition model, but there are kind of two layers to it. So, you know, the real front end of the site is a very broad net that captures all sorts of claims.
Okay.
Those claims kind of triage out into very valuable claims and claims that are more or less bugs. So someone goes into a shop and gets treated poorly, and they want to bring a civil rights claim or something like that. It's very, very difficult to do that, and you know, there's not a good claim there.
Yeah.
But certain collections practices, certain misrepresentations in advertising are very cut and dry.
Okay.
And what that broad net allows me to do is basically watch what's going on out there in the broad economy,
yeah,
and focus in on certain claims that are happening that in the old days would have been brought as consumer class action.
Yeah.
And then I can redirect my marketing spend and project a message out there that focuses much more directly at those individual issues that, you know, that then kind of brings in a lot of more standardized claims.
Right, and then you can scale ways better. Yeah, cool.
Ruth has a
Oh, you can also possibly apply it to employment cases. As you know, there's a trio of cases pending before the U.S. Supreme Court now, which after oral argument looks likely that class action waivers will be enforced.
Yeah, and employment is something, so in employment law and consumer law are usually kind of spoken about in the same sentence right now because they're both subject to these forced arbitration provisions. The claims tend to be much more significant in employment, and people can still sometimes find an attorney who will represent them. But if you have a $30 consumer claim, you don't really have access to any sort of
But there's lots of wage and hour claims now, and they're standardized.
Love the presentation. We've had a conversation a couple weeks back about the unauthorized practice of law, and you're obviously a cravat lawyer. I'm a former law lawyer. How are you going to approach representation and, you know, case disclosure and no guarantee of results? How are you going to deal with all that multi-state stuff?
So there's actually been quite a bit of work. That's an excellent question, and my background at LegalZoom is maybe hypersensitive to UPL concerns. So there's been quite a bit of commentary on multi-jurisdictional practice and arbitration.
Okay.
And it's a much more flexible venue than representing people in the traditional court system. And in addition to that, so there's also like fee splitting concerns. I see a lot of this actually is some of the best barriers to entry that I have protecting my model. I've used a very novel entity structure that essentially allows me to marry a corporation to a law firm in some interesting ways. I'm very sensitive to the states I practice in as far as arbitration representation and how I incorporate, you know, other attorneys from those states when necessary and things like that. I'm also very sensitive to solicitation rules
and commissions. How about commissions from the tortfeasor here or the?
From the company?
Yeah.
So
how are you going to deal with that?
It doesn't from what?
AT&T pays you a commission.
They don't pay us a commission.
Who pays the commission?
They pay us within a settlement context. What would have been statutory. And there's a very well fleshed out literature in several bar associations, you know, ethics practices that basically talk about how you can ethically negotiate attorney's fees as part of settlements. So all of this is tailored basically to be on the cutting edge, but I think arguably well within the boundaries of all of the legal practice rules that a lot of other people would trip over. And again, I think legal that because you know, they're very conscious of that, and I think I came to this with a very conservative mindset.
Cool. Yeah. Very good. Couple.
And what about all the data you're collecting about the different disputes? I think that's also very interesting, could potentially inform policy or.
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, you're a private entity, and you know you might not have an interest in talking to policymakers. But if you see like Comcast sort of claims against Comcast going up, manifold, then that would be something that should be shared, with at least the media.
Right. And I'm actually in discussions with several governmental entities about kind of doing stuff like that. The data is very valuable right now because this has more or less been in concept validation stage, and I've been keeping volume very restricted. It's not like you would have, there's 200 entries in the database, which is not nothing, but I think in the future, where you're pumping a much higher volume through, you get much clearer signals about what was going on.
So then,
another place that I see that data going is Wall Street and analyst report.
Hedge funds.
A little bit of analyst report action there.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think Dan Rubens might be your technical co-founder, actually. He's like, totally listening to your presentation, but filling out the form for Comcast now.
Thank you, Dan. I'm not trying to pause new acquisition right now, but I will certainly try and fulfill your.
More questions for TL? Yeah.
Thanks. This is far-reaching in its implications, potentially for other countries and other jurisdictions as well, and other languages. I know you don't want to speak very much about your acquisitions approach, but I wonder if you could talk possibly about your thinking vis-a-vis mergers. For example, could you and Bernhard's friend who does the flight software in Europe come together in any sort of way? And could you extend the sort of paradigm you're using even to all 200 countries' official languages and law systems?
That'd be a huge amount of work. I do think that fundamentally, though, that the power relationship between large companies that are relatively unchecked by strong antitrust enforcement and their customers is all wonky right now, and that there needs to be a rebalancing of some sort that gives consumers more leverage. When that company runs away with a credit card and charges you a bunch of money that you don't have. And I don't think that that's isolated to the United States, although, Europe has much more robust antitrust enforcement than we do here right now. I think that there probably is a global unbalance, and that technology does provide a great opportunity to take advantage of consumer protection statutes all over the place. So I think as a model, it's probably replicable in a lot of.
One other thought, after you get done fixing the company, could you look at the government processes for responding to complaints?
On the company side, or?
No. Well, on government services.
Sure.
Pension.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of work to be done, and I think that there's a lot of none of this is groundbreaking, as we were talking about before, in a legal technology sense. I do all of this actually with off-the-shelf, cloud applications, and none of it is technically new. I think that there are a lot of processes out there that are just basic interface problems. You just need better design, you need better database management, you need small automated fixes where stuff can be automated, and you have huge gains in efficiency and cost effectiveness. And that's certainly the case with cookie cutter consumer claims and with a lot of agency complaints as well.
Sure.
That in a way that it's an exposure piece, right? So anyone can probably.
It's true. So I wouldn't necessarily, if someone can do this better than me, please have at it. This isn't.
So one way that is very effective to mitigate that risk is introduce some kind of network state. But I've been sitting here thinking what could be that maybe we could think of one, because that really works. It's also the number one thing that investors.
Well, one of the network things you could do is a bounty. So that if you get 1,000 complaints against AT&T, the community gets an extra.
That's good.
That would run afoul of situations, I promise you.
You know what?
Or a rebate of your commission.
That might work.
Yeah.
I think this is my observation, I used to work at bar associations, I'm not like a UPL expert, but I think your model is an interesting one because it does put the lawyer in the middle of the technology, right? So you mentioned that you do have a level of effort tasked against, you know, some of the varying state regulations and whatnot. So that could be, I mean, to Mary Ann's point, that could be somewhat protective and be a barrier to entry to someone who just wants to do tech.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what you think of that, but that seems to me to be somewhat protective.
No, I think that's right. I am using so my entity structure is one that I know other people are using before, and it's one that are using currently, although I don't think many people are using it, that would potentially allow someone who's just interested in tech to incorporate an attorney without necessarily running afoul of fee splitting regulations and still be able to pull the fees into the corporation. But it's certainly untested, and it's certainly a barrier to entry to any established companies that would be very scared of towing the line as far as the regulations go.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to Mary Ann's point about making it somehow, you know, viral or getting network effects going. It's like there might be many little kind of marketing things you could do to get your customers to bring in their friends and so on. Because, as you said, everyone has some frustrations with the corporate world.
And I think to some extent, just the concept itself has some virality built in, because when you take someone from, you know, the status quo of I'll bang my head against the wall for 6 hours and nothing will get done to I'll fill out this questionnaire and 2 months later I'll get a check for $2,000 in the mail, they will probably tell other people about that. And there's some issues with confidentiality provisions and settlement agreements that make that a bit complex. But I do think that this is inherently viral in a certain sense, and that you can expect, you know, decent growth, and that it's also something that would be very effective pushed through PR channels, through popular, you know, media outlets.
Yeah.
You show up bottom of the second page on Google.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and for context, so, and I mentioned this to Dan, who's on the phone. I've been very judicious about kind of turning on the spigot purely through paid acquisition in order to limit the number of people who are coming through so I can kind of have fulfillment.
Yeah, I got them.
Yeah, so I'm not actually trying to make, this is the first time I've publicly presented the company, and I'm not actually currently trying to get at the top of the Google rankings.
All right. Well, I think we're pretty much at the end of our time. So thank you so much, Teal. Thank you for coming. Daniel Gutierrez from Laboralisto has a quick announcement to make.
Yeah, hi, good
Daniel,
afternoon.
go ahead.
Thank you for giving me these few seconds. I'm here with Jose Diaz, my co-founder, and my name, Daniel Gutierrez. We are Mexican lawyers, and we are launching tomorrow the first labor litigation analytics platform for Mexico first, then hopefully Latin America. It's being launched at the Baja California Center here in Rosarito. We sent some emails to some of our friends, and surely I hope to send some feedback in the few weeks ahead.
Great. Congratulations, Daniel. That's great news. You should come in and give us an update.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Great. Well, thank you all for coming. See you all next week,
Thursday.
next Thursday. All right. Thank you.
Okay. I'm in Germany. What's the university? Technical University of Munich. I come there every year. Yeah. I can imagine when.